Thank you for tuning in to another Spicy Toast gaming video. Today we're going to be ranking every champion from best to worst against the other champions in their region. If you are enjoying this Path of Champions content, then please like and subscribe. We're trying to hit 10k subscribers by the end of the year, and we have a long way to go, so any help is greatly appreciated. Now, as I said before, we're ranking every champion in a region from best to worst. Just because I put a champion in the worst category does not mean they are a bad champion, just that they're weaker than the other champions in their region. Some regions are very competitive, so the worst champion from one region might be better than the best champion for another region. With that out of the way, let's get into the video, starting up with the Runeterra champion. So first we have Aatrox, good champion, good removal, great sustain, but you can be a little bit slow, so we're putting Aatrox in the good category. Next up we have Bard, interesting playstyle, good potential for scaling, a little inconsistent and a little slow though, so Bard is going down in the worst category. Up next we have Evelynn, potentially the strongest scaling in the game. However, you are very champion reliant and definitely susceptible to removal, so we're putting Evelynn in the average category. Up next we have Jax. Jax is very strong, hyper aggressive, one of the best champions in the game. He's going up in the best category. And next we have Jhin, absolutely massive amounts of control as well as removal, so he is also tying up there with Jax in the best category. Next we have Kayn, again good scaling as well as sustain, however you are a feast or famine champion, either you're going to scale out of control or you're just going to struggle to get kills, so he's going in the average category. Last up for the region we have Varus, incredibly strong star powers, consistent spell duplication, and absolutely massive amounts of damage and consistent game-ending combos. He is going in the good category. Next up, we have Noxus. Starting off with Darius, he's a strong, aggressive champion, much like every single Noxus champion. However, he is a bit slow as well as inconsistent. Also, you have a very weak defense, so he's going down in the worst category. Next up, we have Annie. Very versatile, large amounts of control, great removal. We're putting Annie in the good category. Next then we have LeBlanc, debatably the strongest champion in the game, incredibly versatile, massive amounts of early game damage, and what is most likely the strongest second star power in the game. She's going up in the best category. Now Samira, one of the three new champions, great early game pressure as well as pretty strong scaling. She's going to tie Annie in the good category. Next up for regions, we have Demacia. Now this one is a bit difficult as every single one of these champions is very, very strong. I don't think there's any way I could rank these three without someone being upset. So I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people that disagree with me, but just know that every one of these champions is incredibly strong. So starting off with Garen, great scaling, great removal, very simple and easy to play. He's going in the good category. Next up we have Lux, very strong combo playstyle, tons of barriers, tons of rally, can consistently end the game around the 5 mana mark. However, she does fall behind the other two, so she's going down in the worst category. Then we have Vayne, very strong champion, able to attack up to 4 times in a single round consistently, massive amounts of early game pressure. She can consistently end the game around the 3 to 4 mana mark, so she's going up in the best category. But again, all three of these champions are incredibly strong, so if you're looking at this at who you should play, I would pick these just based on the playstyle, as they're all so strong. Next up, we have Freljord, so going from probably the best overall region in the game to probably the worst region in the game. So first we have Ashe. Crazy amounts of control with all of your frostbites. However, frostbite is generally weaker than stun in most situations, and she has a tendency of letting games just drag on too long, so we are going to put her in the average category. Next up we have Gnar. He can be a bit weak at the early levels, but later on, very early game aggressive champion, great amounts of removal, control, as well as combat tricks. You always seem to have an answer for whatever the enemy throws at you. We're putting Gnar in the best category. Then last up we have Ornn. A lot of anti-synergies built into his kit, as well as being one of, if not the slowest champion in the game. makes him go down in the worst category. Next up, we have Targon. So Diana, the main contender for LeBlanc for the best champion in the game, at least in my opinion. You'll more consistently get OTKs or one-turn knockout, so winning the game in a single match with Diana than probably almost any other champion. Incredibly strong, but actually not just champion reliant. Yes, Diana is an amazing champion, but she also has an incredibly strong deck to back her up, so even if you don't draw Diana, you'll still be perfectly fine. So Diana obviously going up in the best category. Next we have Leona, strong CCs with a lot of different stuns, great scaling with your units, but you are just quite a bit slower than the other two champions in your region, so Leona goes down in the worst category. Last up for this region, we have Yuumi. Quite similar to Gnar, she is quite weak at the early levels, but if you're able to level her up, she becomes a early game powerhouse. Not quite as strong as Diana, but still very, very good, and so she's going in the good category. Next up, we have Piltover and Zaun. And first here, we have Echo, the one and only predict deck. A lot of crazy combos that you're able to do. Very interesting playstyle. However, you are quite inconsistent. And so while there will be some games where you feel like the best champion in the world, quite often there's going to be games where you feel like the worst champion in the world. And so Echo is going down in the worst category. Next up, we have Jinx, the first champion everyone gets in the game. Incredibly strong kit, able to pump out absolutely crazy amounts of damage, and what many people consider to be the best champion in the game. However, I'm going to do something that might seem rather surprising to many of you. I'm going to put Jinx in the good category. Next up, we have Teemo. Much like Gnar and Yuumi, he feels a bit weak at the early levels. However, he scales so strong with his relics that if you can get him to level 30, he becomes an absolute monster. He can often end the game in the first 2 rounds before Jinx could even be played on the board. That's why Teemo is going in the best category. Last up for this region, we have Vi. She is a bit of a clunky deck, but can consistently come away with the win. You have decent removal and okay scaling, but pretty good consistency, so Vi is going in the average category. Next up, we have Bandle City. Now, each of these champions is also listed in another region as Bandle City. All of the champions in there are multi-region champions, so we have already touched on most of these. And honestly, all of these champions are very interesting as they tend to be weak early levels, but then can scale to be some of the strongest champions in the game. So first, we have Yuumi, like I said before. Starts out feeling pretty terrible, really feels like one of the worst champions in the game, but with levels becomes absolutely crazy. Very strong early game monster. Yuumi is going in the good category. Then we have Teemo that we just touched on in Piltover and Zaun. Very, very strong, consistently can end the game in the first 2 rounds. He's going in the best category. Next we have Veigar, great removal, good control, very unique and fun playstyle. However, you are a bit slower than all the other Bandle City cards or champions, so he's going down in the worst category. Then we have Gnar, great control, good removal, tons of combat tricks. He's going in average. Next up, we have Shurima with Talia, our one and only landmark deck. Since you're the only landmark deck, you have an interesting and unique playstyle. Very unit focused with strong, beefy units that have built-in overwhelm when you have your 3 stars. However, with all the landmarks, quite often they're taking up board space, so you're limited on how you can play. And then you also have pretty weak removal and control, so she's going in the good category. Next we have Noxus, one of the worst designed decks in the game, but okay scaling, pretty terrible second star power, and honestly just a mediocre design overall, quite slow. Noxus is going down in the worst category. Then we have Kai'Sa, strong scaling, interesting playstyle with your evolve mechanic, but in general, fairly consistent. She goes up in the best category. Next up for regions, we have Shadow Isles. Now, the power rankings for the bottom 3 are fairly similar, but first up we have Gwen, by far the best sustain in the game, and one of, if not the best designed deck in the game as well, at least in my opinion. Very strong champion, very consistent, lots of fun. She's going up in the S category, or not S, best. Next up we have Kindred. Interesting champion, couple very different ways you can play her. either focus on Kindred hyperscaling, or you can focus more on a Nexus damage oriented build. If you do that, you have a great defensive playstyle. Kindred can be quite difficult though, as well as inconsistent, so we're putting her down in the average category. Next up we have Thresh, decent scaling, but as well inconsistent and overall fairly slow. Quite often you just feel like a worse version of Bard with your mechanics. I like the direction they were trying to go with his star powers. Didn't think it actually turned out to be the best though, so he's going down in the worst category. Next up we have Veigar. Absolutely amazing removal. Great deck, all built around that darkness mechanic. Good control, and while you can be a little bit slow, you are overall fairly consistent, so he's going in that good category. Next up we have Bilgewater, starting off with another one of the new champions, Jack. With Jack, you have absolutely great removal as well as strong scaling. However, you are a little bit on the slower side. Not crazy, but definitely not a fast champion. Overall, though, he is strong enough to put in the good category. Next up, we have Nami. Great spell-based champion, able to constantly refill your own mana, scale up your units to incredibly strong levels, amazing sustain as well as poke damage with your ebb and flow, and quite often you can go infinite with your spells, just always having enough mana to play spells over and over again, and can actually end the game surprisingly fast once you get higher up. Nami is going up in the best category. Then we have Misfortune, swarm-based deck, really focusing on your early game power. However, she can be a little inconsistent and has a tendency of getting outscaled if games go on too long, so we're putting her in the average category. Next up then we have Pyke, our currently one only lurk deck. If you like board wipes, Pyke is definitely the way to go. He becomes an absolute monster. His deck is relatively champ reliant, but not quite as bad as some other champions. While he can be a little bit inconsistent at the early levels, he turns into a consistent powerhouse later on and is, in my opinion, one of the most fun champions in the game. He's going up in the best category. Next then we have Tahm Kench, another great scaling champion that's also strong at controlling the board, and you have a fairly unique mechanic of being able to duplicate units. Very fun, but quite a bit slower than most other champions. He's going down in the worst category. Then last up, we have Alawi. Interesting playstyle with the spawn mechanic, focusing on growing your tentacle every single round and using it to destroy the enemy nexus. Very versatile deck with decent removal, good draw, and a very strong game finisher. However, you can be slightly easily countered if the enemy just frostbites, stuns, or removes your tentacle, and then you need to start building it back up. So we're putting Alawi in the average category. I believe this is the last region we have, Ionia. So first up we have Set, one of the new champions added this expansion. Very strong, especially the longer the game goes on. Built-in rallies, strong scaling, good removal, good draw, good control. However, you are a bit of a ramp deck or a later game deck, so you do have a weakness of getting overwhelmed in the first couple rounds, but overall, very strong addition to the game. He's going in the good category. Next up, we have Lee Sin. Plenty of combat tricks, however, you are very inconsistent. If you get the right group of powers, you feel like the absolute best champion in the game, but if you don't get lucky with the powers, you feel like one of the worst. And because of that inconsistency, and also how he is rather slow, he's dropping to the worst category. Next up, we have Yasuo, stun-based champion. You have excellent control with all of your stuns and decent scaling. However, since you are so heavily champ reliant, if you don't draw your Yasuo, you will normally end the game, and you're a bit of a slower deck. So because of that, we're putting him in the good category. Last up, we have Master Yi. And honestly, he feels like the deck Lee Sin was supposed to be. Tons of combat tricks, the ability to give your units elusive as well as scale up your entire board. He has a built-in infinite combo with his spells, so quite often you can get Master Yi on the board and then end the game that round or the following round. Very strong, one of the strongest champions in the game. He's going up in the best category. Alright, that is it for our champion region rankings. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Again, we're trying to hit 10K by the end of the year, and we have a long way to go. Any help is greatly appreciated. I hope you all have a great day.